So as free agency starts to wind down, most free agents have come to terms on a contract either with their incumbent team or a new team, and while the Bulls have made solid moves so far this offseason in re-signing Coby White and Nikola Vucevic, as well as bringing in new players like Jevon and Torrey, they do still have roster spots to fill out. And yes, they even have some limited money to spend before hitting the luxury tax line, and with a few remaining free agents still available and the limited dollars the Bulls have to spend if they want to stay below the tax, we're going to be looking at some of the Bulls' options for how they can fill out the remainder of this roster. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Really quick, guys, I am going to be going out of town on vacation starting tomorrow through Tuesday. I've actually got a family reunion out in the Midwest. As such, I likely won't be putting out as much content, and I won't be able to watch the Bulls' first Summer League game that is tomorrow. I'll be traveling all day during that time. So in case you're wondering why I'm not putting out any videos post Summer League games, that's why. Any major breaking news that happens, though, I'll obviously cover that, but I do want to prioritize spending time with my family. But anyway, back to the topic at hand. So as it stands right now, the Bulls have 3 remaining roster spots and nearly $11 million to spend in what we've been calling tax space. Because as I'm sure you guys know, the Bulls are already over the salary cap, but in the NBA, you're also able to use exceptions to go over the salary cap, like re-signing your current free agents for which you have bird rights to, as well as using exceptions like the mid-level exception, biannual exception, and in the case of the Bulls, they also have the disabled player exception, which they applied for in Lonzo Ball's injury, which actually at the time of this recording, I don't believe has been approved yet by the league, if I'm not mistaken. But either way, you have exceptions you can use to operate over the cap. But if you spend too much money going over the cap, you have what they call the luxury tax, which currently the luxury tax line sits at a little over $165 million. If you spend more than that in your payroll, team owners have to pay a tax, which gets more and more expensive the further you go over that line, which, in the case of the Bulls and their cheap ownership, they are never willing to do. If you've been watching the channel for a while, you already know this, but restating it for those that are new. But in any event, 3 roster spots, around $11 million in tax base, which for the Bulls, we can assume that to be essentially a hard cap. They're not going to spend more than that. Now, the biggest question mark, and again, this can change very quickly, so by the time you're watching this, this could be updated, but the biggest question mark in terms of a roster spot for the Bulls is Dosunmu. Ayo right now, restricted free agent, is still without a contract. The Bulls did extend him a qualifying offer to make him a restricted free agent, which means he can go out and get an offer sheet from any team, and the Bulls can match said offer to retain him. But as of right now, Ayo has not received any offers around the league, and that includes the Bulls. The Bulls were quick to offer Coby White a contract extension, who was also a restricted free agent. He was one of the first signings when free agency opened. And I have to say, I am a little surprised we haven't heard anything regarding Ayo, even getting a small deal from another team. I know he had a sophomore slump year, but he's still a very young, very talented, solid defensive player, but even has some upside on offense as well with his ability to get to the rim, especially on those quick first steps on breakaway transition plays. Just surprised that for a player that young, only 2 seasons in the league, was second team all-rookie, was in the Rising Stars game last year, that he's without a contract as of right now. I know he will eventually be signed by some team, but I would have expected a little more interest when you saw guys like Jackson Hayes, Cam Reddish, Matisse Thybulle get deals as restricted free agents, and cheap deals at that. But either way, depending on what the Bulls do with Ayo, that can impact their 2 remaining spots, or 3 remaining spots, I should say. Because for a while now, we've been assuming that Ayo would just stay with the Bulls on his qualifying offer at around $5.2 million for 1 year, which would leave the Bulls around $5.6 million in tax base to sign 2 more players. But say Ayo gets a slightly better offer sheet than that from another team, and the Bulls are forced to match. That makes the tax base more constrained if Ayo gets an annual salary, say, closer to $7 or $8 million. I don't think he's going to get an offer that high, but it also wouldn't shock me, especially when the new CBA rules are now requiring teams to spend at least 90% of their available cap. And there are teams around the league who still have a fair amount of cap space. And then, of course, there is the other possibility that if Ayo does receive an offer and it's just way too high to the point where the Bulls don't match, then you're back to 3 roster spots with around $11 million to spend. But we'll assume Ayo does come back and play on his qualifying offer, try and have a bounce back year and play for an even bigger payday than signing a smaller contract based on his market value right now. So with that assumption, the Bulls have 2 roster spots and $5.6 million to spend before going over the tax, assuming Ayo comes back on his qualifying offer. Well, the problem is you're looking at just signing 2 players to minimum deals, and there aren't that many good options based on what's currently available on the free agent market and that fit a need for the Bulls and that you could get for the vet minimum, because you don't want to sign players just to sign players. You need them to have a role in helping out this roster. Unfortunately, the guy who I really wanted the Bulls to take a chance on, in Mo Bamba, just signed a 1-year deal with the Sixers. As I said before, I only wanted him on the Bulls for the minimum. Low risk, high reward for a former high lottery pick, an athletic big who can protect the rim, but also can shoot it from 3. Yeah, sign me up. But wasn't meant to be. Thus, we're left with just a handful of options. Now, there are some guys who I do think would be intriguing, but I highly doubt would sign for the vet minimum. Guys like Christian Wood or Kelly Oubre, both would fit in need on the roster to an extent, and for cheap vet minimum deals, I think it would be a steal to get one of those guys, but they're going to cost more than that, and at that rate, it wouldn't be worth it for the Bulls, nor do the Bulls actually have the cap space to sign them anyway if they wanted more. But you know what player that just became available who was waived by the Orlando Magic? Bol Bol. I'm not going to be one of those Bulls fans who hypes up Bol Bol like he's some game changer and far better than he actually is, and to be honest, he probably would just be in for 1 year and then that would be it. But he actually was decent last season for the Magic at the start of the year, when they had some guys out. Obviously an insanely tall player that is surprisingly quick and athletic and can also shoot it from deep. I wouldn't be opposed to taking a chance on a minimum deal for Bol Bol. He wouldn't have been an option that I would have remotely considered before, but with most free agents gone and the Bulls still having 2 roster spots available, yeah, I would consider it. And then the other player I'm looking at here is Will Barton. I'm a little surprised Barton hasn't been picked up by any team. It's possible he's looking for more money than the minimum, but I think ultimately he is going to have to settle for that. And while yes, I'm fully aware the Bulls already have enough guards as it is, but getting a savvy veteran coming off the bench who is decent shooting it from outside and can offer some decent playmaking as a 2 guard, he can also play the wing as well, is not a bad option. Not saying Bol Bol and Barton would be ideal fits for the Bulls on the roster, but more so comparing it to the remaining available free agents with guys like Bismack Biyombo, Giannis Antetokounmpo, DJ Augustine, Willie Cauley-Stein, Matthew Dellavedova, and then you're like, okay, yeah, there really aren't a lot of good options out there. Of course, there is always the possibility of trades, sign-in trades, should the Bulls look to be more creative in making moves to get more talent and filling out the roster, but among the available free agents, as well as the salary they have to work with before going into the tax, these are really the Bulls' best options in my opinion. But I would love to hear what you guys think though. Let me know in the comments, and as always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.